patients aren't adopting these new technologies and integrating them into their lives like we'd like them to. Well, lucky for us, Aidan Petrie is here to help us understand what it takes. In his role as co-founder and chief innovation officer for Ximedica, Aidan drives innovation in their core markets of healthcare delivery solutions, medical device development, and consumer healthcare. Ximedica provides expert human-centered research, product development, regulatory, and introductory manufacturing services to leading medical and healthcare companies. I think there's nobody better to talk about those things.
Do what? Hi, thank you very much for having me here. Is this the clicker?
Yes.
Okay, green button. So the perspective, just to give you a sense of where we come from, the perspective that I have on healthcare is sort of bottom up. We're a device developer, and we do one specific thing, which is we help our clients bring devices through FDA clearance and to a launch on the market. And so that's the perspective in terms of how I'm seeing this talk. And we see an awful lot of technology. So at any one particular time, we are working on probably 40 to 60 different technologies within probably 30 or so different clients. And they come out of three places, typically. They're either coming out of the R&D labs of the larger companies, the big corporations. They're well-funded startups who increasingly are running these virtual organizations where they're essentially outsourcing their development to a company that has a quality management system, and their university labs. The universities are struggling these days to figure out how to get some of the technologies out. So that just to give you a little bit of the overview. Oh, there's the thing down there. So I'm going to very briefly give you a few, because a lot of this has already been covered, but just a sort of sense of what we see going on in the market right now, which is largely that the hospitals that we work with, the technologies we work with, are under huge pressure. The margins for hospitals have gone down, the industry has consolidated, and the costs are getting higher and higher and higher, and the reimbursements are moving very little. So that is a first sign that there are things that are unsustainable within this industry. The two graphs here, again, I think from a sort of opportunity standpoint and with the sort of business focus of this conference, they speak to something significant has to change within the field. And on the one hand, it is that while we're not winning the life expectancy prize, we're not winning it while also costing nearly double what anybody else is. And the costs are going up. They're going up for the consumer. They're going up for the insured component as well. And with all of that, we're actually not getting any healthier. So it's sort of the double-edged sword is that we're becoming less healthy. And there is sort of hope on the obesity front and so forth, but we're going to continue to see a rise for years to come. We're running out of doctors. The population over 65, where an awful lot more of the healthcare is needed, is in the classic bubble at the moment and will be for some time. And we are running out of docs. And we're also seeing the demographic of our docs changing very significantly. I think half of surgeons in college right now are women. So there is a significant shift going on in the makeup of those doctors. So as we bring this round to the patient, there is a fairly unsatisfactory path that is in play at the moment. Awful lot of us are seeing doctors fairly regularly. The wait is unsatisfactory, and the time of the engagement is too short. And if you actually then look at what the components of that engagement are, an awful lot of them are not parts that bring a patient any particular satisfaction, and that is a series of activities that go on of paperwork and taking in data and things. And what we see, and to just sort of bring this round to the research side of what we do, we spend an awful lot of time in folks' homes, in clinics, and in hospitals. And we see a profile that e-medicine, telehealth, whatever we want to call it, is causing, which is that the patient is engaging in their healthcare on a significant, they're becoming more knowledgeable, they're engaging in their healthcare. And we, time and time again, as we go through research, we see an individual who is going in and doing their homework, preparing themselves for the meeting with the doc or the surgeon, and is coming out in a dissatisfied state. And worse than that, a lot of times they're coming out feeling anything from disempowered, humiliated. The complaints that we see in the research papers are very significant about did that help? And the answer an awful lot of times is no. And in part, this is fueled by, as all the data that we're seeing today comes online, an awful lot of this data is creating a patient set who's going to the effort of looking up and finding out about their health and feeling that they are knowledgeable, but at the same time, that when they actually have their engagement, they're not actually getting what they want. And so there is a trust coefficient that is in play where they believe that they're doing the right things, they think that they see they're doing the right things, and then what they actually experience in the healthcare setting is nearly the opposite. And again, there is a lot of different, I mean, all the stats here, I think are mostly up to date, but are essentially indicating this huge shift that is going on, but at the same time, the significant lack of satisfaction through that process. And we see that particularly in the graph here is just indicates how, as you travel further into the hospital environment, you engage with chronic care or any chronic condition, you're essentially the level of control is being given to somebody else. So whether it's the insurance companies, the PBMs, the hospital system, the surgeons, that feeling of being empowered and engaged is simply sort of evaporating over time. The holistic view of care, and this is where the vast opportunity is, and that everybody is talking about today, is there are a whole bunch of components that make up a well situation and a well individual and a satisfactory engagement. And those are everything from sleep, the regenerative side of your health, nutrition, exercise, med compliance, and we do quite a bit of work in with pharmacies. And it blows my mind to this day that a third of all prescriptions written never get picked up at all. Something like, I think it's something like 20% never get re-engaged. So in a chronic condition, they'll be picked up once and they won't be picked up a second time. And so there is a complete lack of connectivity for the patient between feeling sick and doing something and not feeling sick and not doing something. But at the same time, the condition is still in place. The critical thing here, I think, is the doctors. Nobody these days, if you get to a certain age, you're not seeing one doctor. You have multiple doctors. The lack of connectivity between those individuals that you might be seeing at any one time creates a dialogue that is largely passing through the patient. And the patient at that point is usually very poorly prepared to be able to deal with all the sorts of information that is essentially hubbing through them. And finally, the caregiver. And the caregiver, I think there are 70 million caregivers in the USA right now, or folk who describe themselves as caregivers. And people talk about the provider-centric model moving to the patient-centric model. I think that's is largely a misnomer, because a lot of times it's actually the patient, the caregiver, the nurse, and then the primary care physicians. So that shift from provider, I think, is going, we need to see it as user rather than patient. And who that full user, and it could be in many cases the caregiver, is understanding their role in how we provide care is increasingly important. So as we look at that scenario, just being able to, this is this is a simple diagram of a very complex structure, because outside of that are a whole bunch of other activities that are going on where the patient, the empowered patient, has even less control. So in my world, we see this myriad of products coming onto the market. And they are wireless, they're connected, they track stuff, they diagnose stuff, they provide medication, there's therapeutics, they are personalized in one way or another, web-enabled, robotic. This is the world that we are dealing with every day in developing products of this type. The world of I'll call it plumbing and craftsmanship that still resides in the hospital. So the surgeon, that has changed massively. Where we're seeing an awful lot of the development today is in this sort of products. And these are ones that are out, and then there's a whole slew that are, and some of these might be out and some of them might not, but there's a whole slew that are in development, and they're in the labs and the universities. And there's some incredibly exciting opportunities there in technology and to connect the patient. So this brings me to who we're dealing with, and we got asked by a big insurance company a few years ago, essentially to travel the country. We did I believe 3,000 hours in people's homes, looking at their customer. And one of the first things when you're in the development business, one of the first things to understand is that typically you are not the customer. That the perspective that I might have, and it took me a long time as a designer, I think that I have a natural empathy and have increasingly found that what my point of view is more or less irrelevant. So this tends to be the view of the 50 plus. So I'm looking at the 50 plus, and I say, as I look at that, I'm like, and I love AARP because the R at 50 plus just doesn't seem to be doing it for me right now. I think there's an awful lot of people that the R won't be coming in for quite some time. But the model that we have is of somebody, and so I'm 50 plus, that is in this sort of condition. Things are not what they were. However, the reality is that the individuals, and this is physicians, this is nurses, this is patients, this is caregivers, are an incredibly tenacious bunch of folk who are in, and this is a short list that we have an awful lot more data on, but our perspective as to who these individuals are, a lot of times we say patient. I don't like saying patient because it implies you're sick. I think I'm in incredibly good shape, other than a few technical issues that are beginning to affect me. I think at this point we have the US, I believe, takes 90% of the world's painkillers. And the reason we do that is, I hope not because we're sort of weaklings, but because we want to get on with our lives and we want to live full lives and live in the way that we used to live. And in particular, the folk in the baby boomers have a very, very tenacious attitude about their health. And there was a little quote down there, which was one of the quotes that just resonated with me years ago, and it was that came out of this study that we did, which was this lady saying, I feel my ship is coming in, but the pier is falling down. And it just implied that there are so many aspects of health and wellness that are not illness. And that maintenance, as we develop products and we understand who our user is, we really need to tune in to the fact that this is not an illness issue. There are components that are illness, but we are all looking for ways to maintain our health. I'm trying to summarize some of the activities that we see with, or some of the concerns that we see from the e-patient in the way that they want to engage with their health. Digestible, actionable information, access, affordable, preventative, and there is a huge shift going on, and I don't think we're by any means there, but we're seeing a shift to tell me where I'm at and tell me what I have to stop. And beginning to get involved. And we're seeing the insurance companies and the pharmacies and an awful lot of the large engagers on that side of it. They want things more immediate than they are right now. They want to have that level of engagement. They want it to be personalized and private. It wants to be their information for them, but non-projected. And in some of the areas we work in this case it would be younger, for instance, teenagers. We have developed a series of drug delivery devices for the teen market. And the last thing the teen market wants to do is acknowledge in any way that they are sick, even though they've got chronic conditions that will be with them all their life. So having something that is private, discreet, and doesn't get in the way of the rest of their life is key. They want to know what the transaction is. And for anybody who's sat with the doc, I think everybody here is aware that there are a whole series of deals that have already been made as to how that doc or how that pharmacy can actually deliver drugs or health to you, or the order with which they can prescribe it. And there is suspicion has come into the field about that. I think there's much more awareness. The interaction between the physician and the caregiver is critical. They don't want to be, they want, and I'll call it for simplicity, an Apple level experience rather than a TV remote level experience. It's got to be the information you need when you need it, not you can work it out over time with the instructions if they're readable. And it should fit with their current technology. Now, the providers have a few of the same needs, but not a hell of a lot. They want the same digestible, actionable information. They want the untethered access. HIPAA has become a huge issue in the development of products, and we see a massive, not a massive, but we see an awful lot of great ideas that are completely devoid of, they miss the HIPAA side of the picture. Clinical outcomes, it is a must in the industry. Protects the practitioner. They're all fearful. Right now there's an awful lot of stuff, medication being given to you, essentially that is to stop one being sued. If it wasn't given, then, and something went wrong, then there are lawsuits. So we develop products in the UK and in Europe and the US, and we look at how they're prescribed in Europe, and we look at how they're prescribed here, and the reason they're prescribed more here is to stop lawsuits. Seamless integration, allowing more productivity, which gives for more interaction, and controlling the costs. Now the reality is a bit different, and I'll go over this as quickly. There's a whole bunch of folk who are left out of the e-patient world. There is too much information. The emotional needs are rarely met. They're not met at the doc today. The emotional need provider is very, very often the caregiver, and the caregiver is very, very often a family member. And the data on clinical outcomes is thin at the moment. I think in time we're going to get a lot better at this, and the data will improve. The finances of developing in this market, reimbursement is it's an extraordinary model that it's very hard to sort of understand how it's set up, but in the prices are essentially fixed. The incentive to create lower costs, they boost profitability, but is that passed on to the patient? Much less so. The reimbursement strategies are shifting at the moment. So understanding, as we develop products, understanding this market, the reimbursement, where is one going to get paid from? And I think that the Frost and Sullivan, and what we're seeing is an awful lot of shift to a direct buy to the consumer, where the consumer, the customer, is essentially making a purchasing decision. It serves a whole bunch of folk well in the short run, but it's not actually a model for success because it's just moving the dollars from one place to another. Regulatory, the FDA is evolving, and when I started in this business, the FDA, we put a product on the market in 12 months. We got it through the FDA. We started clean rooms in China, and the product has been on the market ever since. That is not the case today. In every case, in every one of these categories, usability being the one that we see tripping our clients up most significantly right now. I think there's 100,000 people a year the FDA has assessed essentially die due to a use error. So they are very, very focused on use error. And as you're bringing a product to market, there is a fairly well prescribed journey there that you have to take, integrate it into your development to demonstrate usability. And we've seen drug companies who've been held up on the market for months and months and months because, not that the product wasn't usable, but because they didn't have the data to demonstrate that it was usable. And the controls right now being prescribed by the FDA are going up, not down. For the digital, we do a lot of work that doesn't require digital, a lot of work that does. And the big one here that I'm going to point out is software validation, which is it's a murky world any which way, but for software engineers and for the ones that we have on staff, it's sort of counterculture in large part to how many of them would care to develop software. And I think we say that for every line of software we write 20 lines of justification. So really understanding how to validate software is it's a huge chunk of the activity of bringing a digital product through the FDA. If you can avoid it, if it doesn't have to go through the FDA, then that's great. But if it has to, then this has become a huge chunk of the activity, more so than the mechanical engineering, more so than regulatory. It's a challenge. It's finally in sort of the practitioner's point of view of what we see the opportunity and the challenge is we don't need much more stuff as standalones. We need seamless integration with clinical, social media, and big and data systems, interfaces that bridge multiple and diverse user groups and incorporate human factors, which is another way of saying usability. Intelligible, digestible, actionable information design. And as we have programs that are shifting out of the hospital into the home all the time right now, and the data that you can use when a professional is using it, or the graphic user interface that you're using when a professional is using it, is not the same graphic user interface that you're going to use in the home. It has to be different. It has to be built in a different way, programmed in a different way, safeguarded in a different way, and so forth. So as we, the shift or the magic to develop, we think, at the moment, is deep user and system understanding. Know who you're doing this for, and know the system that you're working within. Understanding flexible, the reimbursement system. So sometimes that means not working within it at all. And we've had products that have been developed that essentially stayed off-label. They didn't go make any claims, and this is more on the consumer health side, and entered the market that way, and then essentially backfilled with their claims later and went through the 510Ks and all that. Understanding from the get-go what your regulatory strategy is. And again, this is specific. If you're going to play that game, then really understanding what's the regulatory strategy, how you're going to get it through, and make those moves early. The last thing, it is relatively easy, not very easy, but relatively easy to develop a product. I spent an awful lot of time in the consumer markets, and we could put products on the market year after year after year, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, at basically in a year. And that part of our business used to be in the toy business. Christmas comes once a year, you have to nail it every year, and if you don't ship, you don't make money. So that same process is what we're doing in the medical field. It's the other stuff. It's the regulatory, the reimbursement, getting the files right, going through the V&V processing, and all of this that holds up. It's still a relatively simple product going to market, but it's all the other stuff you've got to do. So to the folk out there that we see in the industry, it's like, make sure that you're not just focused on getting your idea to market. Making sure there's a relevant clinical outcome at the end. It has to move. You've got to move the needle, and you've got to demonstrate usability. These are a few of the things that we work on a lot of stuff. And then you've got 1 minute and 27 seconds of questions. This is a picture of me before I filed the company, before I registered it with the FDA, which was about 5 years ago, and since then I went grey. Any questions?
Yep. Hi. One of the first statements you mentioned is that your company helps devices get approved by the FDA. My I guess a couple of questions are, do you help them get cleared as well, 510 clearance, or is it just approval? If so, is there a particular class that you work with, whether it's 1, 2, or 3? Are you having any difficulties getting class 3 devices regulated or approved as opposed to 1? If you could just kind of expand on that a little bit, please.
Well, by default, the 3 is going to be harder. Just the barrier for 3 is higher. The risk level is higher. The FDA is essentially, they're looking for safety and efficacy, and they're looking for it to be developed with safety and efficacy in mind, and delivered with safety and efficacy in mind. So our sweet spot tends to be 2. Although, I don't know if you ever looked at the classifications. If you see what's in which classifications, there's a lot of stuff you wouldn't expect to be in 2, like with my glasses. The frame of my glasses is a class 2 medical device. The lens is a class 1. So it's not difficult. It's just like you've got to know where you're going. And the FDA isn't there to stop anybody. It has a guidance that if you understand the guidance, you build that into your program. So you just develop it with that in mind. And that's why, if you imagine you've got a development strategy, and then you've got to have these parallel strategies, one of which would be compliance. One will be your regulatory strategy. So you just sort of build it into the program. So I don't see it as being a problem unless you don't do it. And now at the same time, you go to the FDA, they will tell you the number of particularly in the startup world, the number of submissions they get that are simply not, that they haven't considered that strategy well enough.
Aidan, first of all, thanks for the shout out for AARP.
Oh.
The R, we're in agreement, and it will start to migrate to the word reimagined.
Yeah, fantastic.
That said, I really appreciated the design principles, and I really like the picture you had of the woman and the categorizations that you had around her and the design principles. What's the product that you're just absolutely most excited about that you've seen like in the last 6 months?
Well, I can't tell you that.
What's the product category,
Well, I'm writing a blog right now called "The Future of Medicine is Stuck to You," and what we do an awful lot of work, which are various wearable devices, and there are some really cool things that are both in the market, coming through the system right now. That are essentially, we call them smart bandages. They do some really, really interesting things. So that discretion, what I like from a human point of view is that discretion where you can be connected to your health literally through your phone to your doctor, and it is doing something. Diabetes will have, continuous monitoring and continuous therapeutic. Those are beginning to get dialed in. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's one very cool thing I can tell you. One cool thing, which is it's a device it's a little bandage you put on, and it will, if you're having a heart attack, it rings your, it asks you, it says in a loud voice, could you please sit down? And we have rung the ambulance and it's coming to your position. I like that. That's all. Thank you.